So this is this year's Dogbane. The frost has hit it, the sap has ran out, it's dry, and it's ready for making cordage. I believe this is also known as Indian hemp. I believe the Latin name is Aponaquimum cannabinum or something like that. I'll post it in the video. But what you want to do is take a shell or a rock or something and scrape the chaff off. This rock is a little dull, so I'm just going to use the back of my knife, which has a nice square edge. The only thing you want to be careful with scraping this chaff is that you don't scrape too much. If you scrape too much, you're going to rough up the fibers, and it'll make for weaker cordage, and it'll make the cordage harder to roll. I'm not too particular about scraping the chaff. I looked around, and some of the sources stated that certain Aboriginal peoples didn't even bother scraping the chaff. They just made cordage without scraping it. By scraping it, if you're careful, it'll make it a little easier to roll, and also it will make it look better. It'll look more like fine hair or more like jute twine. If you don't scrape all the chaff, it'll have a rough look, but it'll still function just as well. It'll be very, very strong. Stronger than any other cordage I've made. And I've used bark from trees. I've used plant fibers from several plants. I haven't made yucca cordage, so I don't know how it compares to that, but I would assume that the Dogbane is stronger. But I don't know for a fact. So I'll just kind of quickly go down and rough up that chaff. Scrape off as much of it as you can without damaging the fibers too much. I end up leaving about half of the chaff on there. It's really hard to get all of it off, especially when you start getting high up on the stem, because it is no longer round and there's little grooves in it and you can't get it out of the grooves. What you can do if you want is, once you get the fibers separated, you can grab it at both ends and run it back and forth over a board or something, and that'll take a lot of that loose chaff off that you've already loosened up by scraping it like this. Another thing I do is, if you can find some tall Dogbane, the Dogbane I find usually runs between 2 and 4 or 5 feet tall. This is a little longer than average. You probably can't see it completely, but this piece is about 3.5 feet long. And you'll get about half the length in cordage. It reduces by about half once you make cordage, if you use the entire piece to make the cordage. And just squish it, and it should break into about 4 pieces. This piece looks like it's gonna break kind of funny, which can make it difficult. But it's not rocket science. when you get up towards the top, that's where the stems branch off. And if you want, you can cut it a little shorter, and you'll have a more consistent thickness of fiber, and you'll avoid dealing with these knots. Once you split it, just lay it out flat. Down the length. You want it to lay nice and flat, or else you'll have problems. And if there's any loose strands, try and get them out of the way. Once you got it laying flat, you just fold it over on itself. And you do about 1 inch or 2 at a time. That way you maintain the fibers all the way down the whole length. Pull it, break it off. Pull it, break it off. And if you see any little bits of the wood left, sometimes the little piece will hang on. Get that out of there right away, because it'll be hard to find it later. I've only done this a couple times, and you can see it already. Even though I'm not that experienced with it, it goes fairly quick. This is the first time I've done it this year, so I'm kind of rusty, sort of learning it as I go again. But once you've done this for a bit, it gets really quick. And you can make about 15 feet of cordage in, I don't know, maybe 3 hours or less, depending how good you are. My hands don't function very well anymore, so I'm not that good at it. And once you get a nice strand of it, you want to split it in half. And flip it. And what that'll do is even out the thickness of the cordage throughout the length, because one end of the Dogbane is thick and the other end is thin. If you split it in half and flip it, then it'll be even at both ends.